Hi, everyone. I am Leslie Bogosian Murphy, and I am new to this position of chair of the advisory council. As just a reminder, everyone probably here knows this, but as a reminder, it rotates between CB1, CB2, and CB4. So it's CB4's time. So that's why I am chair now. But I do want to thank Tammy Meltzer from CB1 for the years that she did this, and she was unbelievable. She was great. And I'm going to personally miss her as chair, but she couldn't be here today. But now taking over, I just want to get right into the agenda only because we do have two big presentations. But first, can I get a motion for the approval for meeting minutes? Because I know, Wendy, you had some nice, you added some changes there. You looked at that today. But is there approval for the minutes for April? Great. All in favor? Great. Any abstain, against?
I
Great.
was supposed
Thank
to be picked up
Oh,
at
sorry.
5 o'clock from 128 Mott Street this evening. And the ride never came, and neither did the next three that were booked. So I got a taxi authorization, and I got it when I was on the street. And mind you, I'm standing on one leg with a cane in my hand, and I thought I copied it on the authorization number. I thought I copied it into my phone notes, but it's not there. So I'm calling to ask you for what the authorization number was. I'm finally home. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi, everyone online. Can you hear us again? Okay, great. Sorry about that. I think we just crashed out for a second.
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you.
We were just approving.
Seem to be having problems with the attendance form, by the way.
Sorry, Hector?
Sorry to interrupt. Seem to be having problems with getting the attendance form open. So, somebody could send it separately. That would be great.
Sure, we can do that.
Thank
If
you.
we could send, Jack, can we send the attendance form out again, just in case the agenda? Yeah, okay. We were just going over the approval of the minutes, just for online, because that's when you guys kind of just fritzed out there for a second. So I just wanted to tell you that. So thank you. So now we're going to go right into our agenda, and BPCA is here for their presentation. So if you want to get up there, you can. If you want to stand here, you can. It's up to you. Sure. Here, wait, I have to give you the mic.
Thank you very much. While the presentation gets pulled up, my name is Dan Dixon. I'm the Senior Director of Design Management, and I'm joined here by Nick Spordone, Communications aficionado, expert, whatever your title is. And I'm here for just a brief refresher of our project in general, and then some specific updates as to how construction is moving along. So next. So this is just my brief agenda. I know that we have a packed agenda, so I'll go through these very quickly, and I'm happy to come back to any slides at the end. Next. So project background, next. So why we're here, these slides might be familiar to those who have paid attention to this project, but by 2050, scientists expect 37% of buildings in Lower Manhattan and supporting infrastructure to be at risk from storm surge. So it's really imperative that we act quickly. Heat waves especially will be projected to be more frequent and last longer. There's also a need to improve interior drainage in Lower Manhattan. And the BPC floodplain, which is the black outline that you see on the right side, contains 120 buildings, 25,000 residents, 61,000 jobs, and a lot of critical infrastructure and cultural institutions, including World Trade Center. Next. So the primary benefit is to provide flood risk reduction to everything within that floodplain. But there's also peripheral benefits, including potential reduction of homeownership costs when we remove that area from FEMA's maps, and also attendant enhancement of public space, as we're moving along, we have the opportunity to refresh some of Battery Park City's public realm, and as well as increased landscaping. As you know, Battery Park City is about 1/3 parks, and so parks and parks operations and landscaping is always front of mind for us. Next. So for those unfamiliar, the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Project is composed of 6 projects, 2 of which are Battery Park City projects. So the South Battery Park City project that you see in the lower left is just getting wrapped up now, and we're just breaking ground on the Northwest project, which I'm here to talk about today. Next. Also, planning for this project for this series of projects goes back to 2007 when it was first conceived at the city level, and then obviously Superstorm Sandy accelerated progress there. You can see the thicker bolded lines are the South Battery Park City project and also the Northwest on the north side. Next. And as you might imagine, a project of this scale, it's 1.4 miles of flood wall, has required and cooperation among several entities from the federal to the state to the city level. And Hudson River Park Trust, I'm happy to say, has been a very nice partner throughout this. Next. And we've also had a pretty robust community engagement effort, many large public meetings, a lot of site walks, ongoing CB1 dialogues, and then HRPT specifically. I'm proud to say this is our 4th year in a row that we've come to HRPK in some public capacity. Next. And just as a reminder, this is the alignment. So you can see the dashed line on the left-hand side is where we tie into the South project. And then it's 1.4 miles along our esplanade until we get to the North Esplanade and then across Route 9A and into Tribeca. So I'll be talking about that North Esplanade area today. Next. So let's talk about the North Esplanade. So this is existing. You're all familiar with the Hudson River Park Estuarine Sanctuary to the north. This is existing. And then next, you can see the geometry has changed somewhat. There's a dashed red line of what's existing now. And then you can see the geometry and the space of what will happen after construction. And then also to point out here, the red line that goes across Stuyvesant High School and then across Route 9A, that's our flood wall, including gaps where there are deployable elements only in need to be deployed when there's a storm surge or a significant storm. Next. Here's the existing, so this is a little bit confusing perhaps, but north is to the right here, and you see West Street 9A in the foreground and the Hudson River Park Estuarine Sanctuary on the top there. Next. And you can see from Stuyvesant in the top left, we jog across 9A with a few deployables, a few rolling gates, a few swing gates, and then across BMCC heading north to North Moore Street. Next. And here is the relationship between the Hudson River Park Estuarine Sanctuary and the project. You can see we're bedfellows, and so we're happy to be here to present the progress here. Next. Here's an existing shot looking west along that North Esplanade. And then next. After construction. So here we have the opportunity, because there's no terra firma north of Stuyvesant, we're going to have to reconstruct the entire platform along the North Esplanade. And that gives us an opportunity to do 2 main things. One is raise the entire North Esplanade a few feet, and also make it so that the north entrance of Stuyvesant High School is universally accessible. Currently, there's staircases, but after construction is done, you'll be able to get there via a wheelchair or a stroller, etc. Next. Here's a little bit further west, looking west. I'm sorry. Next. And we're also, using that extra space from the Stuyvesant High School entrance down to the lower Esplanade to provide some extra seating and some landscape areas. Next. So getting into HRPT relevant work. Next. So currently you may have noticed that there's a lot of work going on in Stuyvesant Plaza and along Route 9A. The main effort there is to install a tide gate, which is, if you're not familiar, a passive measure so that in the case of an extreme storm surge, it closes by itself and doesn't allow water to get further into our system. And it's something required by DEP. So we're installing that now. A lot of the work requires nighttime work because we've had to go into Route 9A, and DOT would not allow us to do that work during the day. So we've been working at night for some time. Pedestrian and bike access will be maintained throughout construction, going north-south and also onto the North Esplanade. And then some look ahead what can be expected. We're going to continue the relocation of a water main and electric duct bank in Route 9A during that nighttime work that I spoke of. And then coming soon, we'll be installing what's called a supportive excavation and start drilling piles to create that tide gate. Next. And then moving on to the main flood wall construction project. So just to give you an idea of how we are undertaking this work outside of Stuyvesant High School, you see the two drawings I've labeled 2A West and 2A East. We have to do platform reconstruction here in 2 phases because we need to provide Stuyvesant with egress to code throughout construction. So while we do the western part, which is about 75% of the platform, we'll be providing egress to the north. I'm sorry, on the east side, and then it'll flip. So then work will continue on the east side, and the platform construction will be complete on the west side. So as I mentioned, it's going to be 2 phases. Construction is slated to start in July 2026 with some surface demolition of the North Esplanade itself. But marine mobilization, as I'll speak to in a second, won't start until November 2026. Next. So just to give everyone an idea of what's happening here. So everything in orange is basically a new construction. It's a new platform there. And to get into specifics a little bit, it includes 89 drilled shaft piles about 3 foot in diameter. And then also there's a seepage wall, which is basically, you can build your flood wall, but if you don't provide protection underneath, water can always come from underneath the wall and into your neighborhood. So the 126 IPP, the interlocking pipe piles, it's basically these metal piles that are all welded together to form a cohesive seepage wall underneath the wall. And so that'll be up against Stuyvesant High School. And then all these piles will be drilled into bedrock way beneath the water and the soil to form a sufficiently strong system. And it's going to be done with MinCon drilling, which I understand is one of the quietest forms of drills available. Next. Okay, so to get into specifics here, there are 32 moorings in the estuarine sanctuary, 16 of which will need to be disrupted during work, which is going to be from November, as I mentioned, through July of 2029, so a total of 32 months as conceived now. You can see there's a restricted area, which is going to be for marine traffic further to the west, and then the actual marine barge work will be a little bit further east. So the 16 of the 32 on the south side will need to be removed while this work continues, but the 16 north of that can be used without interruption. And the image on the right is actually from Hudson River Park. These are the types of moorings, as we understand it, to be in that area. Next. Also, there are going to be buoys placed to make sure that it's a safe construction area. There will be buoys that mention there's a restricted work area and zone, and also buoys that mention a slow or no wake zone during construction. Next. So again, north is to the right in this diagram. This shows you the capture that's current and upcoming. So the next slide will be a zoomed in portion of that red dashed area, which is, I'm sorry, don't go to the next slide yet. So you can see the northbound lanes are on the bottom, the southbound lanes are in the middle, and then you can see the bike lanes and Stuyvesant High School to the top left. So let's zoom into that area next. So area B1 has already been captured. That's ongoing through construction of this area, which is through the middle of 2030. B2, which is basically where that geometry changes as it reaches the current rail. It's a fairly small capture that will begin when marine work starts. So that'll be in November. And then B3, which is not very clearly represented here, but it's that light blue color. That's just some hardscape updating that'll take place right at the end of construction, approximately the last 2 months of construction. And I'm happy to return to the slide if anyone has any questions, because it's kind of confusing. Next. Okay, so also I wanted to give you an update on where we are with habitat enhancement. We recently met with Robert and his team to get on the same page with this, and I think we're all simpatico about the decisions moving forward. The left side is a rendering showing, you know, basically how we're improving the habitat below the water.
Was invited.
And some of the types of fish and marine life that we're hoping to attract. Based on conversations with HRPT last April, they suggested putting the same texture on the south side, on the side below the esplanade, and we've since done that as well. Next. And then in addition to the habitat on the seawall itself, that's kind of the outside border of the North Esplanade, we're also taking advantage of the piles that are currently there to encase with another type of texture that we're hoping that will also attract some habitat there. So it's not going to be on the new piles, it will only be on the existing piles, 51 in total underneath that North Esplanade. Next. And it's very exciting. We're already starting to visit some mock-ups. So this is in Elizabeth, New Jersey, is where we're producing the pile encasements. So work is progressing. And I think that does it. Next. Okay, great. So I know that was fast. I'm happy to return to any slide for further discussion.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go to the room first, and then we can go online if any hands are raised. So if anyone wants to start the questioning, please let me know. But so they can hear online then.
I'll repeat the question. Yes, that was planned. The question was, were the trees that had to be removed as part of the current construction planned? And yes, they were unfortunately planned, yeah. Yes, there will be some more along North Esplanade. We have to take apart the entire platform, so all the trees there will have to be taken down.
Anyone else in the Mary?
Hi, Mary Habster from the Lilac, and we more at Pier 25, but on the north side. So I'm hoping we're not going to suffer much from this. But our friends at Atlantic Yachting, and they just adopted the sailing club from North Cove when that was closed. And so they've got 9 sailboats now in the marina over there. And so they're going to be greatly impacted. I guess if you've still got 16 moorings while your barges are there, they might be okay. But one thing I didn't realize it was going to be 2.5 years that would half the moorings would be closed down. I guess I shouldn't be, because this is a pretty long-term project. But can you remind us, for one thing, how far out the final structure will be into that area? I know it got reduced during our early conversations.
Yeah, I think it was 6 feet
Okay.
and
that's what I
some
remember.
fractional.
But I thought it'd be
Yeah.
good if everyone was reminded.
That's right.
You see all that red area and the barges and everything.
That's right.
And Tammy had sent us some questions because she couldn't be here. So I'm trying to make sure you and I have both covered the ones about the maritime. I know she's concerned about the loss of jobs because you predicted a loss of 15 jobs. I'm not sure how that was calculated. Which businesses, can you talk about that?
I know that that was covered in the FEIS, and I did not perform that study, but we can get you more detail as to that. Yeah, Nick, do you want to speak to that?
Thanks, Dan. As Dan had noted, we'd seen the question, so I know it's in the FEIS. I'd like to go back and figure out how that calculation was made and if that has now changed as a result of the score being adopted. I don't know for sure, but we'll mark that as a follow-up for you.
Anyone else in the room? No? I know there were, if we can go back to, I think Tammy had a specific question about accessibility and the change in the pedestrian and the bike lane and how that was going to kind of affect over the term of the project. If we can go back to that page and you can go into that, that
I
would be
think
helpful.
the best slide might be the existing plan of along 9A. Here's probably good too. Yeah, let's stop here. So currently within that red dashed area on the west side, which is the top of the page, we are maintaining 10 feet of pedestrian work there, as well as the bike lanes are not currently impacted. There are MPT, maintenance and protection of traffic plans that are still being approved, in the process of being approved by DOT. And we're happy to share those when they are finally approved, but they're still, in limbo until then. But the bike lanes will be unimpeded throughout. They might have to jog a little bit as construction directs it. But both bike lanes and pedestrian access will be maintained throughout the project.
But you just said, has any preliminary plans, but you said no until DOT?
We do have preliminary MPT plans, but we don't feel comfortable sharing them until DOT has blessed
Sharing them with anyone publicly at all?
I don't believe, well, I would have to check with legal to see if we could share them before DOT had approved them, but
Because I would think, wouldn't you want to share before approval? So maybe CB1 can weigh in and give you some
that's a
good
good point.
feedback
That's a good
before
point.
something is
Yeah,
approved?
yeah.
Wouldn't you think?
I'm not sure. Did we share draft MPT? Okay. I'm sorry. I haven't been quite as involved with the MPT plan. So I think we already have shared with at least HRPT.
There was, with that specific.
Highway, like inland would have you
Yeah.
very similar to cross.
Okay. Yeah, and like trucks coming in and out, how that would, yeah.
So yes, the concept is that the bikeway and pedestrian pathway are maintained exactly where and how, and the timing of where it is at any given point. That won't be included until the last bit.
Right. Okay.
We're happy to recirculate that. I can look back
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And then we could just forward it to CB1 as
Yeah.
well. I mean, I'm sure.
with the caveat that it's still in draft form, but I'm happy to share that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any other in that. Okay. Is there anyone, is there anyone online that has questions? I see hands. Yep. I'm actually watching as well, so I could see your hands going up. Robert and Tom, why don't we go to Robert? Yeah. Robert, can you hear me?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for the
Chris.
presentation and all the work on the project. I guess I had two questions. Just one, just a clarification. So it's the amount of shadowing of the water part of the park was 6 feet. And I guess what was the length? I'm just curious what the area was.
We have
and
that
then,
fully documented that I can get back to you about. I don't have the square footage off the top of my head.
and
It's basically the length of, until the North Esplanade turns the corner by 6 feet.
Right.
So I'll have to get back to you about that.
And then the other question was on appreciate the wrapping of the piles and the bulkhead with the eco concrete or similar kind of substance. I'm wondering if you guys have plans to work with the trust or to do it on your own to monitor the effectiveness of that or the presence of settling of organisms or fish presence in the area?
Yeah, we're
Thanks.
happy to do that. The conversation has already started recently with Robert and his team, and we're happy to report that back as we get closer to construction completion and work with you on a plan there.
That'd be great. Yeah, because obviously, oh, thanks, Robert.
Yeah, just to add on there. Our river project team and our engineering team have met with them. This is actually the textured version of it is not actually an enhancement that we currently have in the park. We have trialed pile wraps in other forms before. They were not what we would consider particularly successful. So we are interested in trying sort of seeing the new version of it. We met with their team to sort of talk about some of the interesting textures that they're doing, the types of species that we think may sort of encrust on it. Later in the project, as they get closer to it, we'll start talking about how do we mesh, how do we incorporate them into our sanctuary management plan. How do we do the monitoring techniques, and try to make sure that they are aligning not just with ours, but also others in the region, so that we are continuing to try to build that collective knowledge on what is most successful. We are, folks have known, we have that money that was directed to us via Congressman Nather, where we're looking at a new habitat enhancement on the north side of the park. And we are also similarly looking at some either seawall or other sort of textured enhancements there. So we're going to want to make sure that we're able to sort of like have similar data points, or we're doing similar techniques and monitoring, so that we're starting to create, much like we have with Tribeca and Gansevoort for oysters, but for now, for sort of some of these textured things, perhaps we can do both the southern and northern part of the park and create some of that comparable data across spaces.
That's great to hear, Robert, because I think, obviously, as you noted, it's a great tactic and technique. Sort of the efficacy has not really been demonstrated, across the estuary. So anything that you and BPCA can contribute to people's understanding of how well it works is really going to be a great contribution. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, I see your hand is up.
Yes, hi, good evening. I agree with everything Rob said, and thank you for the presentation. The check valve, I've been particularly concerned about CSO outfalls into the estuarine sanctuary. And the check valve is on 78, the major outfall that goes out. If it's a high tide or super high tide and a heavy rainfall, that bottles up all of the surface rainwater and the sanitary waste in Battery Park City until the tide gate opens, so the rain can be evacuated. Have you done, when you were doing your studies that said there would be minimal or de minimis impact on the estuary, had they done worst case scenario studies to show what the impact of this big flush with this 60 million gallon a day pump will have on the species, the aquatic species? That's the primary one. And then secondarily, we've seen with sewer outfalls, there's a residue on the benthic population, on the base of the substrate that affects the benthic environment. And just like you're studying the wall, I think it would be really helpful if we could better understand the effects of CSOs on the estuary, both the speciation, the fish, the aquatic, and the benthic environment, because we're going to have a new planned 1,000-foot residential tower evacuating waste into the same area. And it would be good to start getting baseline data, because the whole west side has been inundated with high-rise buildings that are all evacuating their waste into the estuary. And this would be a wonderful way to start understanding the potential impacts of that and how to mitigate it. That's one suggestion that I hope you might take under consideration. And second is there any compensation for how is the park compensated, or for the taking of the estuarine sanctuary by shading, or the removal of the moorings? Kind of we the people are suffering in that way, and financially, the park has to be self-sufficient. So is there any way to, or is it already considered that one authority would provide compensation for the other authority for the taking of environmental or recreational assets, if you will? That's the second question. That's it.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the very thoughtful description of the CSO and the environment. My understanding is last year there was a very significant and in-depth study done, to your point. Nick, do you want to speak to that?
Hey there, Tom. Good to see you
Yeah.
again and the team. So brought some copies here. What I do want to make sure I get, I'll distribute it to the folks who are here, and then I'll send you the link there, Robert. In our FEIS, there's a number of appendices, as you know, for a project this large. There's quite a bit of documentation, but I'll give you the chapter and verse. It's Appendix E, Natural Resources. And then starting, I think it's on page 18, there's a multi-page memo that Arcadis, which is one of the firms that worked on the progressive design team, drafted for us specifically with regard to the CSO. Net, and I'll send you the chapter and verse. You guys can read it all through, and then if there are follow-on questions from that, Tom, certainly happy if you want to send them to us, we can get them answered. But the
Sure.
net, it was
Thank you.
the overall, you're very welcome, overall reduction in the pollution as a result of the project overall would mean that even with the additional combined sewage outflow, it wouldn't have an adverse effect on the estuary. So I will send you the specific memo that is actually quite detailed, about 5 pages or so with graphics and citations. But I do want to make sure that you all have that. And if there are questions that you have as follow-ons, we're happy to be back to you. The second item was about, and I think it's a really good flag, as we are both trying to kind of solve for the problem of rising tide and storm surge. We also are kind of trying to overlay that considerations you've raised with respect to a new very tall building coming online. And while not part of our project, I do think it's certainly something we can look at going forward about how that might also contribute to some of the additional outflows going through that area. So that's something we can take back. Now, again, not as part of the project, but I do think it's worth the consideration as well.
Thank you very much.
These things going forward. And then the last bit about the compensation, I don't know.
Yeah, my understanding is there was significant compensation that I think is going to, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but $6 million paid from BPCA to HRPT for the estuarium, which is still in schematic design.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Is there anyone else in the room or online that wants to ask a question or comment about this at all?
That I don't know. I would have to get back to you about that. I think really it's more of a kind of a flag, like please respect this work area, but I'm not sure how enforcement works. We can get back to you about that.
Hi, this is Tracy online. Can you hear me okay?
Oh,
Yeah.
hey, Tracy, how are you? Yes,
Hi.
we could hear you in the room.
Thank you.
And
We
online.
missed that last question that you just answered because whoever asked it didn't have a
Yeah,
microphone.
can you
That's right.
repeat?
That's my
Can you-
fault. So the question was, how do you enforce the buoys that say, slow or no wake during the construction period? And I think you heard my answer, but we'll have to get back to you because I'm not sure how enforcement works there.
Okay, thank you. I also had a question back to the issue of the lost jobs. And I know, Nick, you said that, hi, Nick, nice to see you. You said that you'd get back to us on that, but I'm wondering if there's any mitigation plan, since Tom raised the question of compensation, is there some mechanism for making up for those lost jobs?
No.
I don't believe so. I took a quick refresher of the FAS in preparation of this. I didn't do a deeper dive. I can confirm for sure. I don't believe so, but I can confirm for you.
Tracy, any other questions or follow-up?
Another question I have, thank you, Leslie.
Of course.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but hi everyone. Another question of going back to the trees, and I know that you hear a lot about the trees. We've been getting calls to our office, and I know CB1 has raised this. The concerns about the number of trees being removed is greater than the plan projected would be. And some of the feedback we're getting from community members is that Turner Construction has been removing trees to for convenience in terms of having, moving the construction equipment around and just removing trees to make that easier, that were not part of the plan to be removed. So could you speak a little more to that? I'm sure that you've been asked that before, but if we could get some clarity.
Yes, very helpful, Tracy, and thank you for bringing it up. As you know, have spent a lot of time on trees in these past years and in these past weeks, especially, put a particular focus on it. So to be clear for the group here, and then we can follow up, Robert, and with the team with some paper on this with links to the relevant documentation. No trees that were supposed to come out, not supposed to come out, have come out. There was the FEIS, which called for envisioned a removal of a certain number of trees, and then post FEIS last December, there was a technical memo that was issued because the change that we had uncovered due primarily to the changes crossing Route 9A necessitated the removal of more trees than that were contemplated in the FEIS. It was sufficient enough or substantial enough that we issued a technical memorandum post FEIS to note that specifically. But in addition to more trees coming out, we also found a way to add more trees at the end of the project. So net, I think it was an increase of 25 more trees that are going to be in than were originally envisioned during the FEIS, because we found a way to add more trees, even though we had to lose more at the outset. They are obviously not going to be as large as some of the trees coming out now because they are older. But the new trees being planted are not exactly saplings either. They range in caliper from about 8 to 14 inches, and in some cases, 11 to 14 feet. I will get you the exact numbers. I don't want to speak without my notes in front of me. But net, no trees that are not supposed to come out are coming out. And as a result of the trees that did have to come out because of the change to the design around Route 9A and the crossing, we issued a subsequent memorandum. And then what we've done recently when we got some of the incoming inquiries about trees is we said, you know what, we had some previous documentation and presentations from older public meetings that had specific maps about where the trees were going to be. We took now the opportunity to update those maps to show exactly where the changes were reflected that reflect the changes made in the post FEIS memorandum. So everything is now matched up, and I can send Robert and the team, and Tracy, I'll send you those documents as well, so you can go tree by tree, reach by reach, and see what is coming out.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you for coming.
Thank you
There,
very
there,
much for
there
the
were a
time.
few things that you said that you'll follow up on. In fact, a lot of them. So maybe we can just, in an email, we can just follow up for sure. And then
Of course.
we'll,
Of
okay.
course.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you for the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up on the agenda is Tom. Tom Fox. He has an alternative plan for the Manhattan Cruise Terminal. I don't know if many of you remember, but a few meetings ago, EDC came and they presented their master plan for the Manhattan Cruise Terminal on the north side of the park here. It touches the park. It's obviously not part of the park, but the park bookends it. And Tom has an alternative plan that I guess he can better describe. Tom, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Can you introduce the members of the team that's presenting?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm Tom Fox, many of you know, and Daniel Huberger is a principal at Datner Associates and architects, excuse me. And they actually designed this initial section of the Hudson River Park pre 9/11. So the design never got implemented because the facility was fortified, if you will. So they've been working with us for the last few months, and us as the City Club, our waterfront committee. So thanks for the opportunity. We presented this to Community Board 4, the Waterfront Parks and Environment Committee, last month, and it was, I was allowed to say, warmly received, even though they didn't have a quorum. And we are hoping tonight that the Hudson River Park Advisory Council will recommend to the trust board that EDC consider a Plan B, as it would have a de minimis effect on the park as compared to what they're proposing. So if I can share my screen, I'll just start off with a brief what was meant to be here a long time ago and what's here now. And Daniel will then bring you through the design, a comparison of the master plan from EDC and what we're calling Plan B, because at the last meeting, Leslie had said that one of the community boards concerns was that there was no Plan B. They were just given a Plan A. So the City Club has developed this over the last 2 months in an attempt to provide an alternative that is more reasonable, perhaps. Thank you. Okay, sorry, I didn't change the title. I'm lazy. As everybody knows, the west side of Manhattan was all filled in, and it bristled with piers for break bulk cargo. It also had passenger ship terminals, and this is at its heyday in the 1950s. One thing unique about it is you can see the highway curls in. The Manhattan had to be cut into to create this because the federal channel is sacrosanct in navigation. This is them in 1986. And you can see again the highway wiggles in and goes around them. So the highway fell down in 1974. It looked like this for the extent of it. And all of those ships were gone, and it became this. The proposal was to fill it in all the way up to 59th Street. And some of us fought against it, and we were successful in getting the Hudson River Park started. The northern end of the park has always been a difficult section because of the fact that this is no longer in the park. The passenger ship terminals aren't. So if you notice, this is just around 57th Street. This is early on, so it's 1988 maybe. The sanitation pier is under construction at 57. We came up with this vision plan, the first plan of what to do with the West Side waterfront. And the northern section was treated generously. As you can see, Clinton Cove Park was very large. Half the head house was taken off Pier 94. Pier 94 was for public recreation and boat docking. Then the next plan, this is what it would have looked like at the time, envisioned. It was also envisioned that the passenger ship terminals would have a promenade right along the waterfront where people could walk along and look at the waterfront, which is what was going to happen prior to 9/11. The final plan that came out treated this differently. As you can see, the entire head house for Pier 94 is gone. This was the final plan for the park. But at the time, Mayor Giuliani wanted to take the passenger ship terminals out of the park. And just before the legislation was passed in 1998, they took them out of the park. This is from 1995. He took those two piers and said, we want to have an option on these two piers, which they had exercised. So that whole section became not tennis courts on the roof and commercial navigation, but a trade show exhibition on Pier 94. The park was built with a much smaller Clinton Cove, and you can see the huge pier shed. The huge pier shed is now a movie studio. So the west side is, look at the view. The west side is being overwhelmed. This is a non-maritime use, may I add. It wouldn't have been allowed if it was in the park, but it was allowed because it belonged to EDC. Now, every pier on the west side has been rebuilt, every pier, by a park corporation that makes no money. The passenger ship terminal has deteriorated to the point where this is a movie studio. Pier 92 was condemned 10 years ago. Pier 90 just was condemned 3 months ago. And we've lost half of our cruise industry to Philadelphia. The cruise industry is a $420 million a year um, industry that has that impact on the city, and it supports 2,667 jobs. So we've just took a big economic hit, and it's being managed by the agency whose job is to make money for the city on a property that's producing revenue. So it's confusing that this has fallen into the water while the rest of the waterfront has been rebuilt. And we're suggesting that instead of making the project even bigger like this, we should kind of go back to our roots. And that's what Danielle's going to present right now.
Okay. I will share my screen. I think whoever else is sharing, maybe Tom, you.
Oh, sorry.
If you can.
Got it.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. Can everybody see?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Daniel Huberger, and I am a principal with Datner Architects. As Tom mentioned, we were the original designers for segments 6 and 7. I see Connie Fishman is here tonight. So hello, Connie. The last time that I looked at this as a designer rather than as a user of the park was over 20 years ago. And as Tom said, what happened was 9/11. A big security fence went around the area, leaving, as you know, the umbilical connecting Hudson River Park to the segments to the north. With the bare minimum of the bike path and a very narrow walking path that replaced the promenade. So this proposal is an opportunity to take another look at the site, but I really have to acknowledge the huge effort that was made by EDC to develop a master plan for this site, which is to accommodate both the cruise terminal and the public along this segment of the waterfront. However, we think that in several respects, the master plan does fall a little short and could be improved in significant ways. And what we'd like to do tonight is to show you this comparative scheme, Plan B, as we are calling it, which in many ways is based on the exact same parameters as the master plan in terms of functionality of the cruise ship terminal, the size of the ships that can be accommodated, all of the necessary infrastructure that goes into that, but enhances certain elements like river coverage, like intrusion into the navigable waterway, which is a concern, and equally importantly, the Hudson River Park Esplanade experience. So, as I said, the master plan improves the site in many, many ways. Connection to DeWitt Clinton Park, the whole improvement of the cruise terminal itself, which is obviously very much subpar. It improves the parking situation, maintained view corridors, et cetera, and very importantly, introduces an onshore electric power infrastructure at this site, which is both a huge environmental benefit and a huge logistical and infrastructure challenge in terms of planning and phasing and so forth. So all of those positive aspects of the EDC master plan are things that we have absolutely retained. However, we have focused on what we think are the disadvantages of their plan. One is that it pushes the bulkhead line considerably far to the west and adds 6 additional acres of cover to the river. The piers get elongated. That's a function of the size of a new class of cruise ships that may be docking at this site in the future. These are 8,000 passenger cruise ships, real behemoths, even bigger than what is there now. That lengthens the piers. Those intrude into the waterway, not only as the result of the piers getting longer, but also because the pier starting point gets pushed further out west as the bulkhead moves west. The footprint of the proposed terminal building is very, very deep. And although it does create a lot of new upland area and potentially park area, a lot of that area is actually not sunlit. It's underneath the belly of the building. And one last thing is that although it does increase the amount of green space, when we looked at the drawings and we understand that just like our scheme, things are very conceptual and perhaps not entirely worked out, that much of the green space is located on setback terraces that would be difficult to access by the public when the terminal is in operation for security reasons. So we started by doing a deep dive into various federal and maritime standards on the construction of cruise ships. Of course, we had the example of the master plan to follow. And then we looked at a number of cruise terminals throughout the world and looked at their size, and in particular, looked at one important aspect of their design, which is the last line on this slide, which is the width of the concourse, which is where basically most of the action of the processing of the passengers, whether they're arriving or departing, takes place. So you see all of these numbers are somewhere between 150 and 100 feet wide, considerably narrower than the building being proposed in the master plan. And the truth is that there is no ideal configuration for a terminal. It is really site specific. And when you look at various designs throughout the world, they vary greatly in their configuration. But here, the emphasis is in producing a long and narrow building because the site is a long and narrow site. So these diagrams show very quickly our process, the existing condition, the removal of Pier 90, and exchanging the water coverage area from Pier 90 and putting it into the upland in a new platform and a new bulkhead. So that we are trying to keep at or very close to a one-to-one relationship so that there is zero or close to zero net increase in total water coverage for the new project. And then we put in the new passenger terminal, which will be a long, narrow building. And our goal was to make it as narrow as functionally possible. And then out on the piers, we have a 2-level pier, which is what exists there now. It's a very, very good, very practical design. Our design does have some changes, and it's notably different from the master plan design, which basically has a long gangway that runs above the pier deck. We have increased the amount of square footage on the piers, and the reason for that is that area serves to compensate for the area that we are trimming out of the pier terminal building. So, in order to make the the cruise terminal as narrow as possible, we need some of that space, and it's primarily space for baggage storage and dispatching baggage. We're putting that back on the piers where it actually exists today. And here's a conceptual rendering of what the project might look like. So you can see it's a long, narrow building. Where we have the view corridors, we have these articulations in the building to give it a little bit of scale. We preserve the view corridors underneath. You can see the 3 berths with the ship approaching, and then 2 of these very large vessels. The new parking structure to the north on the right-hand side. And then the roof of this terminal, since eventually the buildings on the east side of this highway are going to be transformed, probably become residential buildings. We have a planted roof. Some of this could be publicly accessible. Some of it could be for the use of the passengers in the cruise ship terminal as they're waiting to embark. The way the building is organized is very similar to the master plan. Passengers who are departing go to the top floor of the building with their bags. They check in. They are processed for security on the level below. And then the level below that is used for baggage laydown or for embarking onto the piers themselves. The bulkhead will be moved westward. It will be a piled supported platform, like many parts of the park are, and as the piers are constructed. So although it will appear to the users of the park, to the esplanade, as terra firma, of course, this is entirely like a man-made pile-supported structure with a river below. And you can see in this drawing the distance between the existing bulkhead, which is that dotted line in the middle, moves 100 feet out into the river, which is much less than the master plan is proposing. And in order to make this work, we need a very efficient, very effective ground transportation area, as the ground level of the terminal is described, with the terminal floating overhead. And we have kept many of the features of the master plan. And that really has to do with the direction of circulation for traffic. So right now, with all of the traffic arriving from the north, there are incredible backups and queues and conflicts with Route 9A. So what the master plan did, and what we've repeated here, is that buses and provisioning vehicles, shown in pink here, arrive from the north. And personal vehicles and ride shares, taxis, and things like that enter the site from the south. If they are arriving from a north direction on 9A, they make the turn at 47th Street, and if they're coming from the south, same turn at 47th Street. And then they would exit the site at 52nd Street. The one exception to that movement for smaller vehicles is vehicles who are going to the parking lot, which is to the north of Pier 92. They will also come in by the north. This is the same as the master plan was predicting, or they could come from the south. And then they would drive out onto the lower level of the pier and then get to the parking deck. And the capacity of our drop-off area is identical. You can see the numbers at the bottom of the screen, identical in terms of buses, in terms of private vehicles, identical to the master plan. And this is a concept rendering of what it would look like if you were on the esplanade. So obviously, river to the right, the esplanade, a buffer zone, the bike path in 2 directions, another buffer zone, the drop-off area, and then you can see under the building, you can see Route 9A beyond. In this view, we're looking south. So you see Pier 88 in the distance. You see the connection from the terminal building to the gangway. And what you can see at the lower level of the pier is a truck. The lower level of the pier is not for passengers. It's for staff and for provisioning vehicles and other service vehicles. Bags and passengers get to the ship on the upper level of the pier. And I won't go into this in much detail. Basically, it follows the same step-by-step circulation system as the master plan, whether you're embarking or disembarking, but with one notable change is the master plan suggests that the entry to this entire complex will be near the parking garage at the northern end. And what this means is that people entering the terminal very often have to travel within the terminal. And if they're traveling from Pier 92, they have to make a U-turn and go all the way back. Similar kinds of things happen if they're going on Pier 88. And I think this might account for part of the reason why the master plan's terminal is so wide, is because they have a more complex circulation system. What we're proposing is an entry somewhat in the middle of the building, not in the exact middle, but close to the middle of the building. And then the travel from that central arrival point will be linear, so that travel is in one direction only, and that leads you to basically a more efficient building, a more efficient floor plan, and a narrower structure. Here's a view from under the belly of the building, and it is quite literally a belly. The building has been shaped to maximize daylight under the building, making it a welcoming space. You see some of the users at a crosswalk coming from the city and accessing the Esplanade, which is to the left. You see the two lanes of drop off for passenger vehicles, and then 2 lanes for circulation. And then on the far side, you see the buses dropping off, and they're coming in the other direction from the north. And here is a view from the south, showing the Esplanade, showing the bike path, the drop off, Pier 88, the cruise ship in the distance. Now, we are also showing this textured new seawall, which very much resembles the project that you just saw at Battery Park. Same idea. It's the encouragement of marine life sanctuary. The master plan was a little bit silent on that, but that would be an emphasis of our project. And of course, it's an easy adaptation to make, but wanted to call it out. This view does take a little bit of artistic license. We would be standing in an area which would be the electric substation. So everything you see would in fact exist. That Esplanade would be exactly where it is, but some of the river in the foreground would be infilled by a new platform, which is required to handle the huge amount of equipment necessary for the power substation, which is a considerable piece of infrastructure. And here's a quick comparison of the two schemes. So you can see the EDC master plan is 1.3 million square feet. We are just a little bit above 1 million square feet. That difference of 250,000 square feet obviously represents a huge amount of area, a huge amount of bulk, a huge amount of shadow, and frankly, a huge amount of budget. So we think this is a more economical scheme in many different ways. You can see the concourse width for the EDC master plan is 250 to 300 feet deep. Our concourse is 125 feet, which is in keeping with all of the precedents that we showed you at the beginning of our presentation. And so here's what's going on. So at the top, you can see the current pier, which is about 1,000 feet long. You can see, all the way up in the upper right-hand corner, the raised traffic viaduct, vehicular viaduct. In the middle line is the master plan. So extremely deep building, pushes the bulkhead 270 feet out from where it is. And to that, you have to add another 70 feet to the length of the pier to accommodate the larger ships. And that moves the pier head line 340 feet out into the river. Plan B, all the way at the bottom, instead of 270 feet, is only 100 feet. We have the same elongated pier. And so when you add the pier elongation and the movement of the bulkhead, that is 170 feet instead of 340 feet. The master plan also proposed giving extra length to the mooring length to the pier by having a line of dolphins at the end of the pier, and we replicate that same structure. Again, I have to say all of these dimensions are a little bit approximate because the drawings that we have, were not actually dimensioned. So we did takeoffs, our best guesses, but I would say they're all, fairly close in the ballpark. This shows a comparison of the two footprints. The master plan is in red, the existing is in blue, and everything in white is ours or existing. This shows the two buildings side by side, so you can, quickly see the comparison in volume and in depth. These are the various elements of each of the two options. And here, the major point of comparison is the open space. And in order to have a fair comparison of the two schemes, we are only considering open space that is open to the sky. So both schemes are comparable for the amount of sky exposure on the ground level, 2.6 acres. But I would say a lot of that space in our case is arranged along the waterfront, whereas it's divided between the highway side and the waterfront in the master plan. And then we have the potential addition of the rooftop terraces on top of the pier, which adds another 8 acres compared to the 2.4 acres of the master plan. So once you total those two, all of that open space up, there's considerably more green open space, habitat, public occupiable, planted area in Plan B. Private vehicles, we've talked about this already, but sensibly, actually exactly the same amount, both in type and in number. This is a comparison of what the ground floor plane would look like. So you're looking straight down, and on the top is the master plan. So you can see the park area is split between a park that runs as it does now along 9A, and then something that is called a park in the master plan. But if you look at the gray line above where it says building above, you can see that a lot of that area is in fact underneath the building. And then Plan B below, where everything is grouped, as you saw in the rendering, along the waterfront and is not below the building. So to sum it all up, we incorporated all of the many positive points of the master plan, but we made a number of improvements. So trying to keep the amount of water coverage to net zero, to minimize the amount of incursion into the waterway, which is a navigational concern, making the terminal building smaller, which is both less intrusive, more efficient, more economical, increasing the amount of open space, potentially publicly accessible, open to the sky, and we think really improving the Esplanade experience by keeping the park entirely along the river. Here's a quick comparison. Obviously in red, the things that concerned us the most: water coverage, pier intrusion, the size of the buildings. And in summary, as I said, we think certain key benefits here which would not only benefit the public, but benefit navigation on the water side and uh, hopefully benefit the city by having a more efficient and less costly option for the marine terminal. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. You mind if I just wrap up for 2 seconds,
No, of course.
Leslie?
Sure.
So it's our hope that the advisory council might consider writing a letter to the trust or bringing it up at one of the next trust board meetings, that there should be a consideration of a plan B, because time is money. And if you're going to try and cover 6 acres of the Hudson River Park estuary, it's not going to happen tomorrow. If you want to have shore power for those ships, we've got to get this done as expeditiously as possible. If we're building the same amount of water coverage, same amount of coverage in kind as Little Island did, then we won't have to go through rigorous environmental studies on the impacts or the lengthy review process and potential for litigation subsequent to that review process. So it really behooves the public to have a plan B comparing apples and apples, which we tried to do, and we're hoping the advisory council might consider weighing in on this for the benefit of the park. As you can see, both to the estuary and the public spaces, it's a significant enhancement. And the rooftops, just think of Pier 57. You go from the first deck to the rooftop, you never get into Google's place. Well, it's the same thing here. You can keep the security of the ferry terminal, and you can use the rooftops as a public park. In addition, this building isn't used 165 days out of the year. We believe that an economical building with, easy access and egress and open space on the roof, perhaps in the center for large events, or that could generate more revenue for the city and more revenue for the fund for the community board, would be an enhancement to the overall process. So I thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much, Tom. Before I go in the room, I see Hector's hand has been up for a little while. So Hector, I want to give you a question.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for the presentation. Very informative. Maybe I missed something. I know it was mentioned about shore power, but
Yes.
is the capacity going to be able to handle the new larger ships that you're planning to dock there?
So the master plan anticipates a substation with 70 megavolt amperes, which is the way that they size these things. And that is sufficient for all 3 ships, which basically you can think of as buildings, basically, they're hotels, simultaneously. So what we are proposing is exactly the same.
Great.
And
Okay.
and we did not question their calculation or their capacity, but it's an apples to apples.
At what point is that going to be installed, though, and set up? Is that going to be installed right after the construction areas are set up for them immediately, or is there something else we have to wait on?
So the phasing of this is extremely complex, and I don't know if I can answer your question entirely.
Gotcha.
The ships right now, the ships do not have access to this kind of infrastructure. So
Right.
there's no reason the ships could not operate temporarily without it. But the phasing of the construction, running those high power lines out there and setting up the equipment, the phasing of that is a complicated question. And it would happen at some point during the construction, but I don't know exactly when.
Yeah, I respect that. It's just unfortunately that could be a problem because who knows how long this may take, and if it's in phases, let's say phase 2 or 3, it might get delayed. And meanwhile, we have large ships docking there, releasing a lot of pollutants into the air.
Toxins.
And toxins, exactly. So my concern is that, okay, we're going to put it in, but it's going to be delayed, or it'll be a year or two before we have it. Meanwhile, we have these ships docking there and utilizing the infrastructure.
Well, we think
So,
that's the advantage of this approach because the EDC I keep saying the Port Authority because they were in control when I was at the park, so it's a slip of the tongue. But EDC um, has said they would provide shore power to Pier 90, and then reneged on that promise when they had to go. Pier 90's fallen into the river. We're going to have to do a new terminal. Um, we believe that by not having to cover 6 acres of the river, and by having a building, they say that it's $1,000 a square foot to build a building in Manhattan. So if you're 250,000 square foot smaller, that's $250 million less in funding you need for the building itself. So less financing, less regulatory review because you're not going into the river, makes it move quicker. So even though it has the same problem that the master plan does, is it's not going to happen up front, it's going to happen quicker if you don't have to go through all the environmental hurdles and approvals if you get them. Because if you don't get them,
gotcha.
then what happens? So
Okay,
here
so
you don't even need them. You need a
okay,
review, of
so
course. Yeah.
so it's the hope that this will happen accordingly.
Yeah, it would make it happen quicker, hopefully, if this
Gotcha.
Plan B was finally approved somehow. So, and this is just a concept. Again,
Yeah,
we've only had 2 months to work on it. It was because
gotcha.
I heard someone say there was no Plan B, so we thought it would be
Wonderful.
useful to have one.
Great. I just have a quick second question.
Sure.
I didn't see any details in the plans of a bridge crossing the West Side Highway.
It would
Um,
cross from the center. Uh, it's in one of
was that?
it's in one of the renderings. It's
Yes.
Oh,
a
okay.
bridge over the highway from the center
Good.
point of Dewitt Clinton Park, the high point, which is
Ah,
above the highway, not from down at 54th
okay.
Street where they had it. It's more in the middle
Oh,
of the park, going out over the highway and then down.
beautiful. Okay, that's what I was concerned about because I know the Intrepid has one,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
was wondering, but that's great. That's great news. Okay,
We've wanted
thank you.
that bridge since the 1980s,
Uh,
90s.
I
Like I said.
the I know the presentation went by really, really quick. We're happy to share it with you, and you'll see the bridges there.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I'll take your word for it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hector. Anyone else?
Uh, Thank you for the press. Defined in the original, but are there program elements that are not there, or is it just because of the inefficient circulation that they had?
To be fair to the EDC, we're not entirely sure why. We think that is one of the reasons. Whether their program adds a lot of additional space in terms of I don't know, I'm making this up, but like for example, event space and things like that, that is a possibility as well. We think that our scheme in terms of functional spaces, spaces that serve both the debarkation and embarkation of the cruise ships is adequate. We think the building has to be this size. If we had to add, an additional floor to the scheme to have, which is what the master plan does, it has an upper level that is described as lounges, somewhat mysteriously. We would certainly have the option to do that. But I would say that our scheme is right-sized in terms of the marine functions of the terminal.
And just one other comment, could the rooftop, looks like they're disconnected right now. Could they be connected as far as the park, or?
Yes and no. So it depends a little bit what they're being used for. And, each one of those roofs, by the way, is quite large. It's a couple of city blocks long. So what we were thinking, and the reason for us separating them, is to absolutely separate public functions from cruise terminal functions. So one of those roofs would be available to the public, and one of them would be available to the cruise terminal passengers. And you don't want those two populations to mix, which is why we separated them. But could they be joined? Physically, architecturally, yes, of course, but functionally, we think they're better off being slightly separate.
Actually, a slight collection. It's tripartite. There are three
There's a
sections
third
to
one.
it. And
So
the two view corridors are where there's not green on the roof, where the building is more de minimis, if you will. And that serves as a separation between these three spaces. The center of the spaces could be dedicated to just passenger ship terminals during the departure process, just make it a pleasant experience in New York. While the other two on the north and the south are accessible to the public, a la Pier 57. The elevators from the first deck up, you never interact with the passengers. It's totally independent, so you don't have to worry about security, which I think might be more acceptable to NYPD, but who would know? Um, and this way, the center space, should the building be used for an event? I mean, it used to be used for the accountant's test and the architect's test. I think Daniel said he took his license exam there, right?
I did.
So
Another emotional tie to these piers. My God.
so the function of the piers, there's 165 days when there's nothing happening there. So there could be a multifunctional space there, and that rooftop could complement it, and that revenue could supplement both the city coffers and the community fund, well, because it's money being generated by the structure. We thought, perhaps.
And the way these would stay separate is each rooftop would have a public elevator, a public stair, public egress that would go through the terminal but not communicate with it. So everything would stay, as Tom said, separate.
Thank you for the Plan B. I've seen many presentations about this project, and that has been a question in my mind for over a year now. I appreciate many of these updates that you've made, but I do have a few questions about first, the traffic pattern at the north side of the complex, especially as it relates to the studios building, and any traffic that would be generated from the use as a Blue Highway terminal, because that I could see conflicting with just general cruise terminal traffic.
Right.
And secondly, to your point about extra space, I know that making this complex also function for the community by adding concessions or other businesses that can be available to people other than passengers has been a strong interest throughout the process. So I wonder if your plan does accommodate those kinds of businesses or public access.
I think that the um, the details as to whether there would be retail and what type of retail and those types of things are things to be worked out in a plan. This is a thought of just having a conceptual approach that compares apples to apples in terms of what's currently on the table. I firmly believe that whatever happens here would be a result of a hopefully a very meaningful and transparent community design process, but that's not under my control. As far as the Blue Highway goes, I've had the good fortune of working at Brooklyn Marine Terminal, trying to preserve that 122 acres of commercial maritime as a hub for a Blue Highway, so that there would be no trucks ever coming out of Pier 92. It would be only quad bicycle-sized vehicles. Now, currently, they're coming out of Pier 76, and they're not allowed to operate on the bicycle path. So they've been coming out of Pier 76 and actually walking these quad things up to 38th Street, 40th Street to go across and then start their runs. That's a ferry terminal. This would be something different. This would be looking at more solely that type of vehicle. And they come in, they've been coming in about 10 at a time, but they could come in 25 at a time. And they would queue on the pier. Now, how they would access and egress the site would be something that would need to be worked out with state DOT, city DOT, the community board, the Hudson River Park, because they're going across Hudson River Park property. So it will be a complicated affair. But in the long run, many of us believe that reducing truck traffic in Manhattan primarily and in many of the other boroughs is a critical issue for air quality, just like the passenger ship terminals. All those UPS trucks and stuff idling on the streets are not really helpful or or good for the quality of life, if you will. So this would replace them with electric powered quad bicycle containers of a much smaller scale that would have greater flexibility and would have to stay on commercial street areas, not on greenways. And I'm sure this entire system, which will probably be worked out in the next 3 to 5 years, will find a rationale for where spaces are used by whom and when. But we're just assuming that we will use best practice. Well, we're not going to be in charge.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have another question? Or?
I just wanted to clarify that that the pier design that you're proposing does also extend into the channel.
Yes, it extends
Distance.
half the distance.
Yes.
And that extension may not have to be. They've applied to WRDA, the federal government, for a exemption from extending into the navigable waterway, which is not very popular with mariners because this is a very narrow section of the Hudson, nor is it popular with recreational boaters who will have to go around them. And it's questionable as to whether the city really needs to get 8,000 passenger ships and a 5,000 passenger ship at the same time, because that's 42,000 people going in and out. So those questions, I'm sure, will be answered in the overall impact statement for this. And all of it could be nothing if the WRDA isn't approved. So this has a smaller extension, which is, if it's approved, less intrusive. And we believe that if we don't have the 8,000 passenger ships and stick to the 5,000 to 6,000 passenger ships that currently dock there, we could get away without extending into the waterway. But all
Thank
of
you,
that
Tom.
would be worked out.
Yeah.
Thank
Mary
you.
has a question. Mary has a question.
I think one thing to make sure this group all knows is that the park gets a portion of the revenue from the city. The Hudson River Park Act provides for them to get 20% of revenue from the passenger ship terminal. And so when you talk about increasing revenue, reducing costs, I think that's actually important for this group to keep in mind.
Great. Anyone else online or?
So apologies if I misspeak. I'm not sure I completely followed. As it relates to the pier configurations, I think you said currently the pier configurations are 2 levels.
Correct.
And I think you said in your design, you're contemplating retaining 2 levels.
Correct.
I might have missed in the current master plan that's been proposed. What are their configurations?
So
Could you bring up the design quickly, Daniel? Because it's
Yes.
it's easier to see visually.
Yes.
And to be fair, these are both conceptual designs. It's just theirs is quite different.
So let me see if I can.
It's back
Okay.
a few images.
For some reason, let me find a. Okay.
There you go.
So what the master plan is proposing is a 2-level pier. So there is a deck at the height of the bulkhead, a conventional pier. Obviously, it's going to be built up higher because of, the new DFE and resiliency requirements. But a conventional pier deck. The second level of the master plan piers are, if you look at the disadvantages arrow, which lands on something, that is their second level, which is, as far as we can tell, a narrow gangway, which is for passengers. Perhaps it might have a conveyor at a level below for baggage, but it's very, very narrow. What we're proposing is basically taking that narrow umbilical and making it much broader. Not quite as broad as the level below, because basically we have an apron that sees the sky, and that's where you have the cranes, and just like you have now on the piers. But you have a central spine, which is large enough to accommodate passengers and baggage. And by having all of that extra room for baggage, the baggage obviously is moving from the ships to the
So
pier.
the alternative, Daniel, while you're saying that?
Yeah, let me.
That's fine. I think
Yeah.
you've answered the question. It's,
Yeah.
it's two levels.
That,
And then
that
just
that's basically it.
quickly,
Yeah.
sorry, just quickly, and this just may be my own reaction to the term Plan B.
Yeah.
But if this were to move forward, I might suggest we refer to it as an alternate plan that addresses concerns with the EDC master plan. Plan B, to me, just it suggests something different.
Thank you.
Point taken.
And I just want to, thank you. And I just want to let everyone know kind of where CB4 is at on this, because we have been in it for many years in very detail. We really appreciate, Tom's plan, and we heard it at one of our meetings, and we really enjoyed it, and we were very positive about it and liked a lot of the elements. But what's very important to consider is that it's very, very conceptual, considering what the master plan was that the EDC presented, right? It's extremely conceptual. So we talked to the EDC about maybe a lot of the elements that this has and incorporating it into the master plan. But for example, or one or two examples, CB4 is pretty insistent on having the rooftop be all solar or some sort of sustainable energy. So we could have that sort of sustainable energy that fuels, quote unquote, fuels the terminal. And that was something that we were very, very adamant about. The other thing is, and I know, Tom, you mentioned this, but the substation is significant. The structure is significant. And it's nowhere in this conceptual plan, though. I mean, it could be put in somewhere here, but that substation, which is now part of a plaza in the master plan from EDC, is big. It's great. It's not here. And if we put it in here, that's great, but it's definitely going to hit every other aspect, the pedestrian path, the bikeway, then everything else kind of dominoes effects on it.
Actually, sorry for interrupting. It is shown. So if you look at
where is it? Sorry.
It's right here on the screen. Okay, can you see it?
On the water, on a.
It's a concrete pad, basically. It does not interrupt the esplanade of the park or the bike path, which goes around it. It's right here. It's almost the same location that the master plan shows it. Basically,
just that part is going to jet out. That you mean?
Correct.
Just that little part.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Correct. So it's the same size. Obviously, that would have to be verified with EDC. We assume EDC's plant is correctly sized, and the logic is the same. The power is coming from Con Ed, is being generated at the 49th Street Con Ed plant, and is coming north.
Yes. And Hector, just to answer your question, phase 1 has already been approved of getting from the Con Ed inland energy to go underneath the West Side Highway. So that's phase 1, as Daniel was saying, as it goes in phases.
Yes.
Leslie.
And just another thing, hold on, I'm sorry. The piers themselves, those are publicly accessible in the master plan, just FYI. They're public concourse rooftops.
So they are potentially accessible in our scheme too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And you see that diagonal, that's because there is something coming down In this case, we thought if we have a rooftop park, could come down onto that pier. Obviously, all of this has like security implications and would have to be approved by the operators, but physically there is a connection.
Yeah, and Daniel, I just want to say we were really impressed. This is really there's some really great alternative elements in here that
Thank
I
you.
mean, we couldn't even see why they wouldn't be workable, right? It's really great. We
Well,
were
and
really impressed.
Leslie, if I could respectfully disagree with the solar rooftop. Um, Open space is so critical in the city, and I say we because I have a little bit of ownership of the park itself. Lost a lot of Clinton Cove Park when Pier 94 was rudely built this size that it was. Having access to 4 acres of open space on roofs, similar to Pier 57. If you've ever been up there, it's beautiful. Um, would be, I think, the trade-off between that and solar, given the fact that this building is going to be facilitated directly with that power plant, um, it might be a reasonable trade-off from both a breathing perspective, a green roof perspective, and a public space perspective to consider the park as an alternative. That's all.
Understand.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, anyone else online or in the room? No? You want? Okay, any motions, no? Okay, Tom. We, that's why I'm asking if there's a motion. If there's a motion, if there's a,
Well, what we would like to have.
hold on one, hold on
sure.
one time.
Sorry.
I
We
think that's
obviously
what I heard, right?
welcome a letter, as always, from the advisory council. I may respectfully put out, and I think folks know this, project is not being led by the Hudson River Park Trust. We do not have the ability, our board does not have the ability to force reconsideration of this. This project is being planned by the New York City Economic Development Corporation. We are certainly happy to receive your letter and share it with them. I do think the advisory council could also choose to write directly to EDC to share its comments as well.
And CB4 would probably have to abstain from a letter if there's anything in conflict with something that we
Sure.
voted on already, just
Of
FYI.
course.
Okay.
And we're just asking it for it to be considered.
Considered, absolutely.
That's,
Yeah.
there's no, this must be
Yeah.
at what time frame, given what.
It's
just
Tom, hold on.
saying-
We have Tom,
Yeah.
hold on one second. We have a motion in a second. If someone
Sorry.
can outline what the letter would be, we can write that down.
What were you, Tom, first? What was the outline of the letter that you were hoping?
Can't hear.
Oh, hold on.
What was going, your sense of what you would like to see in the letter that you are, and then we can sort of, supplement that with our ideas.
Our primary purpose for doing this was to give an alternative for public review, because this is just the beginning of a process. And at the beginning of the process, there should be an alternative that has a lesser environmental impact for sure on the park and has a greater public open space for the park, if you will. So a letter that says, as the process moves forward from its conceptual plan, if you would consider this alternative, which has no water coverage in the estuary, and you can list what you think the benefits are, but I think that getting it into the process as something that should be considered is the first step. And I'm into community design all the way. So what happens happens, but having it on the table as an alternative, I think, is an important step. So I agree with changing it. I just called it Plan B because Leslie said we didn't have a Plan B. So I think it could be titled more appropriately as an alternative plan for the redevelopment of the Midtown Cruise Terminal that has a de minimis effect on the environment and a significant addition to the park or something like that.
Okay. Fair. Wendy?
I think we can work on this, and I think I'd like to see a strong statement from the advisory council beyond just, look at. So.
I mean, just from what I'm hearing, I think we have an idea, but Wendy's right. It's working through the language to get that impact that you want and identifying some of the specific benefits that we can present so that this is a concrete proposal, not just, oh, there's more to look at in a general sense.
I would be happy to work with whomever to get something in a reasonable time frame, a week, so that it could be considered. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. So if we work on a letter and we can present it at the next meeting?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Definitely.
Okay. Hold on, just we can get.
No, but they can't hear you online. That's why.
I would just add one takeaway from your presentation is that it does much more to integrate to the existing design of the park and to create a more continuous flow along the waterfront than any proposal that's been put forward so far. So from the point of view of the park, I would maybe suggest that that is one positive that could be added.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Tom, thank you. Daniel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll stay on for the rest of the meeting.
Okay. Thank you all. I'm going to drop off.
Oh, Chris, because he's going first.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. Yep. No, yeah, I will. Here we go with the trust report. Yep, you guys go. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Chris McGann, I'm going to give you a quick public safety report. We sent it out. Most of you in the park know as summer's rapidly approaching, the park is becoming extremely busy. Significant increase in bicycle traffic on the bikeway, pedestrian traffic in the park. We want to remind everyone to please pay attention out there, especially when crossing the bikeway. I see a lot of near accidents all the time with people not paying attention. Just wanted to touch on that before I start. While crime overall in the park remains down, there were a few notable incidents that occurred recently. On April 16th, a female park patron reported that an unidentified male tried to film her in the Pier 97 restroom. When confronted, the perpetrator fled the park. The victim ran out the door and was assisted by HRPT staff and PEP, who responded quickly. The incident was reported to NYPD, and we provided the investigative detective with relevant video footage. On May 30th, on the bikeway near Pier 94, just a little bit further south, a female park patron reported that a male on a bicycle grabbed her buttocks as she went by and then fled north on the bikeway. This incident was also reported to NYPD, and we have provided the investigative detective with relevant video footage. At the time of this report, there were 3 incidents of female park patrons that were victims of a Cash App scam. This was very big last summer, and it's coming back again. Since this report, there was a 4th victim. It's a pretty simple scam. They come up, they say they're trying to raise money for a basketball league or some other, noble cause, and people offer to donate through a Cash App. And at what point one of the perpetrators will ask, I'll just enter the address into your phone. And when they hand them their phone, someone else distracts them and they change the amount to $2,000 or more. And each of the victims lost at least $2,000 in these 4. We're working with NYPD on this. We're trying to explore some signage and maybe some of the bulletin boards that we had last or 2 years ago. What else we got? On May 7th, we lost a significant amount of furniture on Pier 97. 3 utes came into the park about 8 o'clock at night for no apparent reason, just started picking up our furniture, throwing it over the side into the river. We lost 15 chairs and 3 tables. Lastly, not too long ago, we received numerous reports of a suspicious male hanging around the playgrounds, filming children by Pier 25. At that time, concerned parents called 911 and they took pictures and video of the suspicious person. This was shared with us. NYPD took a report, and while no crime was committed, PEP was made aware of the suspicious person. The photo was shared, and we've remained alert while patrolling this area. We haven't seen him again. Lastly, we want to remind everyone that we've been taking a proactive approach to crime prevention, continually reassessing our security measures and signage in the park. PEP officers and HRPT staff have been warning park users about leaving their bicycles, scooters, vehicles unlocked, bags, cell phones, and other valuables unattended. This is an endless message that just doesn't seem to spread, but we're still on it. We just want to remind everyone now, do not leave your valuables unattended or unlocked in the park.
Also, don't hand over your phone with a financial application open.
Yeah, just one more thing on that. The Venmo app, people may not realize if you have it on your phone, it's signed in. You actually have to sign out. Just closing the app does not sign you out. But it's happened on all apps. Do not hand anyone your phone.
Yep. Hector, do you have a question? No, it's from former. All right, we're going to lower your hand then. Because we are already over time, I'm going to be very quick, although I know there are a couple topics that folks are going to do. First up, did everyone see the top of our report? We've had a very special sighting in Hudson River Park. We've got an extraordinary both media response and social media response to our beaver that has been visiting Gansevoort and our soft shoreline on the south side. One of those great things that we hope help people understand the importance of installing soft shorelines, even they are technically fill. We believe that it is it's a lone beaver. We believe that it's possibly a scout looking for a new place to be. We have seen we've had at least I think 2 sightings now, 2 confirmed sightings, including some really great video of it. We're very excited about it. It certainly was thrilling for I think the folks who thought that perhaps it was a mutant rat coming out of the water in the first instance. In the report, we have this Thursday, June 11th, we are going to be at Manhattan Community Board 4's Waterfront Parks and Environment Committee, giving an update on the West 29th Street to 44th Street design. Again, we are currently focused on the area between the north side of Pier 79 onto Pier 84. That area so we are coming back. This is going to be, I think, the 4th community meeting on it for feedback. So it's really, the design team's incorporated a lot of the community feedback that we received at the previous meetings, from the vision meeting to the initial round to the previous ones. So we're excited to keep the project advancing. I think when folks see it, it's going to be amazing. The estuarium, we have been deep in planning granular items. And when I say granular, I mean, like, does this table need an electrical outlet? How many taps do you need on this thing? Is there a sink here, or does it need to be 1 foot to the left? Very, very technical, detailed items. With our science team, our education team, we've been talking about storage for closets and how many does this closet need doors, or does this need to be cubbies? So the program, step by step with the River Project team, it's the way in which you have to design buildings. We are going to be going to Manhattan Community Board 1's Waterfront Parks and Cultural Committee on Tuesday, July 21st. That is also posted if folks are interested in joining and learning more. We are excited. BPCA mentioned earlier that they, as part of the mitigation, they're contributing $6 million to the estuarium. We have been working hard at work with the design team to try to bring down costs as much as we can for construction, value engineering, without sacrificing any of the program elements. And are currently trying to still come up with sort of what the total estimate be. The $6 million does not put us over to the final amount, but it does certainly bring us much, much closer. So we are excited about that. At Pier 40, construction continues across the entirety of the building as part of the structural work and other necessary repairs. It is continuing on. We are, I think, going to be moving into the summer over into the P3 space, much like we were able to move into the VCB space in the winter. We're using the P3 space in the summer, or taking over the P3 space in the summer while they are able to be outside. VCB obviously not using the space as much in the winter because they are a summer-based program. So we're trying to accommodate everyone. We appreciate appreciate everyone bearing with us as we move through disruption. It's going to be continuing for some time. Exciting though, however, we were able to advance rooftop field number 1, which was down to all but Russ Rubber Crumb. It is slated to reopen, I believe, this week. We are on target. They're doing some final carpet smoothing up there. It is not like a perfect field because we did not replace the entirety of the concrete roof underneath it, but it is certainly going to have much more cushioning and be a much better experience for our players. So I think everyone's going to be excited when it gets to reopen for the summer season as promised. Pier 51, and we've mentioned this before, we had a delay in the core playground equipment for the replacement of the playground equipment on Pier 51. We took a good hard look. They were going to be able to do the construction. I think the initial proposal I saw was like they could start construction in the very end of June, and it would run through mid-August, dead through the center of the summer season, and take off the splash pad for the entirety of it. We decided instead that we would pay to store the playground equipment, so it will construction will start at the very end of the season. So I think it's going to start right now is in the last week of August, keeping the playground and the splash pad open for the bulk of the summer season. Some of this work is temperature sensitive work, so we can't push it all the way into the winter, but we're trying to push it as late as we can. Boathouse roofs, we are continuing to do work on our boathouse roofs. The work on Pier 96 is almost complete, and Pier 84 are underway, and they're expected to be complete by mid-June. These repairs have not required disruption or have not disrupted the use of the boathouse, so all of our boathouse programs have launched and are going away. The season is well underway. Pier 76, starting mid-June, in like the next 2 weeks, we are expecting to start some of the work for some under cribbing for the work on Pier 76. This includes cribbing in the upland area, some repairs to some piles. Again, this is work to help maintain the continuity of the pier. It is slowly deteriorating. I don't want anyone to be under any impression that this is adding and doing anything more than stabilizing work to maintain its use for now. It will have limited surface impacts. I believe they're going to have some like trucks and some other things coming in to get equipment in. So the dive team can use some on-land equipment, can use on-land way to get the equipment there on a day-to-day basis. They can drive it in truck and then push it over the edge, essentially onto the barge. So we will have some impacts. Given the scale of the pier, it will be very minor on any public use. And we are trying to work around some of our events. So Blues Barbecue and other things won't be disrupted. Skipping ahead, I hope folks have seen, we've had a number of food carts kind of that are going to be rolling out this season. We have a number of new food carts at Pier 84 while we are teeing up for the construction up there that we are discussing on Thursday. We are not going to be filling the concession. We mentioned this before. And so we brought in a series of food carts and added a bunch of more seating. I'm told that it's been well received. And last time I was up there are a lot of folks using it. So hopefully it's there. I'm not going to go through the descriptions. We also have a new operator in the Chelsea Waterside Park concession. Who will be operating there doing coffee from that cart as well. So concessions abound, and I know I mentioned last time, and I'm still waiting for the cart in the Pier 40 courtyard tunnel because Pier 40 could use some coffee. So I know the parents are going to be excited for it. Mayor Mandami has created the Commission on Government Efficiency, looking for ways that government can deliver faster, smarter, and more efficiently. First meeting was tonight. They have other ways that you can participate. We are all ears, and as always, we are always trying to strive to how we too can be more efficient. So we are tracking that process to see how collectively we can all work better to improve our services while reducing costs. Our environmental program is cooking along. We have a lot of great things. I'm not going to go through it all. We have a huge range of projects. I think it's over 24 different visiting scholars this year. We have two, our CUNY Research Alliance Scholars Program, where CUNY funds through the Office of Research gives grants for two selected projects. Are underway. You can read about them in the report. And again, it's 24 researchers from colleges and universities around the city. We have drivers of oyster spat recruitment, understanding gut biomes gut microbiomes in urban burbs, including on the way in which you can track the movement of disease through the accumulation of microbes on microplastics. Certain birds apparently can only get certain diseases, so you can track the movement of them by testing them from microplastics, is what I'm told. It's a fascinating thing. I'm interested to see the results. We're also doing things like testing the wave reduction capabilities of our reef balls in Gansevoort Salt Marsh. Our public programs, we have our program guide, which we'll pass around, is far underway. You should come out and join us. We have a lot of really great things this year. Healthy on the Hudson has returned with 3 sponsors, OBE, Chelsea Piers, and Pure Gym Fitness, running 4 days a week. We have jazz on Pier 84. We have blues, boardwalk up at Pier 97. We have big city fishing across a number of piers. And some cool ones that I will mention. We actually were just hosting High Rocks, which is a massive athletic competition, 50,000 competitors on Pier 76. And they are currently in the process of loading out across 10 days of competition, which is a very exciting piece. We also were with them. We're able to have over 800 community members participate in our free fitness classes on Tuesday, which is sort of the day between some of the races. Some other ones, things I want to flag upcoming in this June, on June 18th, our Juneteenth celebration in collaboration with the Lady of Us Hip Hop returns at a celebration of Black social dance in America. We hosted this past weekend Youth Pride on Pier 84 with the Hendrick Martin Institute, and this is the high school, LGBT high school in New York City. And this year, one program we were excited. We've for many years been partnering with Wheeling Forward to put on an accessible skating event in the Pier 62 skate park. This year, we're actually expanding to have 2 more clinics, one for basketball and one for accessible tennis. So accessible basketball and accessible tennis, which are excited to sort of invite new communities to learn how to use our facilities, how to participate in the sport with it. They bring in some adaptive pieces. They have teachers and instructors. It's a really great day for folks with mobility disabilities. Particularly, they focus on folks who are newly disabled, sort of learning them how they can do some of the adaptive sport pieces. Looking ahead, we have Sunset Salsa returning, and Broadway by the Boardwalk is coming. I'm excited to share with all you the announcements. We have some Tony Award winners who are going to be performing, including someone who just got one. For this performance, and that's up in Clinton Cove. Blues Barbecue is back, among many other things. Of course, this is just Hudson River Parks Trust programming directly. We have a lot of partners in the park. We have our boathouses, each of which are running. We have the Intrepid, we have Little Island, we have Chelsea Piers, we have many other partners. We have the Lilac, we have a number of partners who are running programming this summer, Manhattan Youth and others. I encourage you guys all to share with the group when you have a chance. Moving on, I know one question on everybody's mind is July 4th. July 4th, July 4th, July 4th. The International Tall Ship Parade, the International Naval Review, the International Aerial Review, and fireworks. We are still trying to work with the NYPD to have their final public safety, so the final approach to public safety on the west side. We are part of a much larger whole. Ultimately, this is sort of going to be a lot of the NYPD's discretion. What we've encouraged everyone to do is that we do anticipate that there is going to be some access controls across the park, exactly what they are, where they are, how to access them. We will all announce when we have the announcement to make. We encourage all of our tenants, ticketed events, much like it was for the fireworks 2 years ago, including for the daytime, where we do sort of anticipate similar crowds and the need to sort of control crowding in the park. Again, all of that has to be controlled by the NYPD. We can't control crowding on our side of the highway. You want to control crowding, it has to happen on the east side. Once you've gotten across the highway, it is too late. We are working on trying to come up with logistics plans, working across folks for that and Pride. We do know that Macy's is now coordinating with Jersey City for their fireworks. So in the most recent announcement, they said they're Hudson River fireworks. Those are Jersey City's fireworks, put on by the same company that's put on Jersey City's fireworks always. As I understand it, with the same mortar shell that they have always put on, still paid by Jersey City. They are now coordinated in timing. So Jersey City is still having their fireworks. The main show is still on the east side. For those who are really hoping to have the experience we had 2 years ago, it's not quite going to be forthcoming. It does mean there are going to be fireworks viewable from the park, as there historically are for it. On that one, I do think I see a hand from Alexander. Alex?
Yeah, just quickly back to the adaptive programming with Wheeling Forward.
Yeah.
Would love to connect with you on that because Chelsea Piers at our foundation just launched its own wheelchair basketball program. And we have a couple of adaptive events for table tennis and volleyball planned for the summer. So I'd love to see if there's an opportunity to sort of work together on any of that.
Great, definitely. We'll follow up. We'd love to help share.
Awesome.
I will otherwise pause on July 4th because I do think there might be some questions here. Questions in the room? Mary?
Did you expect this?
Yes.
Well, actually, it's maybe information. I don't know if, I mean, you must have because they're planning to dock in the park, but I understand there's going to be 2 ships at 26.
Yes, we are still working with exactly where. It's 25, 26, one at each.
I asked about 25 and I got an answer about 26. I'm like,
2 off of 1. Still work in progress in that embayment. We are anticipating 2 ships. They are not ships that are doing public visits, so they are just docking in the park. But they should be nice. We are trying to incorporate it into the larger safety plan.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I looked them up and I guess it's probably because they're both excursion boats and bringing passengers in rather than, and that's why they're not open to the public.
Yes, they're like, I think they're not doing the sort of the educational visit. Any other questions on 4th of July? No, that's it. I will otherwise sort of wrap up. Thank you all. It's
Thank you.
8:35.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Robert. The only other things that we have is new business and future agenda topics. I know, is it, this is what I saw, is October 5th our next meeting? Is that right? Or is there one before that?
I think you guys set the schedule.
October 5th? I have October 5th on my calendar. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something that's a few months away.
It's usually 6 a year.
December and then November is the last. It's the last.
Of the year. I will check this. Then we can go back to exec and re-examine. Okay, well, we can double check and then get back to the council. And as you could see on the agenda, we do have possible topics. Stop the Chop wants to come and talk to us, which is great. But anything else for new items, old items, new business, old business, anything? Can I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your help. Thank you online.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Mm.